Hello and welcome to Moderate Fantasy Violence, a podcast about pop culture and the world around it. I'm Alistair.
And I'm Nick.
And today we have a Marvel double bill for you. First, we will be travelling to alternative dimensions with Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness, and then we will be journeying within ourselves to serve ancient Egyptian gods in Moon Knight. But before all of that, Nick, what have you been up to since we last spoke?
In the last 2 or 3 weeks, I have been returning to my occasional flirtations with video gaming to attempt to play Dark Souls, which is a bit of an endeavour compared to some of the other games I've played. This is, of course, the incredibly popular action RPG from, I think at this point it must be about 10, 15 years old. Although the version I'm playing is the remastered one, which I think is slightly more recent. And yeah, this is basically just a game in which you play a single lonely warrior in a dark fantasy land, trying to survive and maybe work out what the hell happens to the world. It's mostly fairly survival/action orientated so far. There's not an intense amount of plot or characterization, it's just me, a sad man, dying a lot. Dark Souls has a reputation for being incredibly hard, which, considering I, as I've probably said whenever I've talked about my gaming endeavours in the past, am a relatively occasional, inexperienced and often bad gamer, is possibly a decision I'm going to regret. So far I've made it a few levels in, or a few different sections in. It's slow progress.
Yeah, the one thing I know about this game is it has a reputation for being very, very difficult, so it sounds like that's justly earned.
So far it's got just about on the tolerable side of a difficulty curve. Like, I play the same boss about 15, 20 times, and eventually there's a sense of slow progress. I start to feel like I'm getting the hang of it, and eventually, after a couple of great runs, I beat it, and I have a sense of accomplishment. I'm sure eventually maybe I'll hit a boss I just can't kill, because, I'm only coming to the end of what I think is like the third level or so, but really the first sort of big section, and I'm already starting to find it quite hard to go on living.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about this game. It does seem to be very popular. So yeah, and it sounds like an interesting world that it's set in. I suppose one of the sort of grim, magical dystopias. Is that the sort of sense?
Yeah, magical dystopia, fantasy tropes, found a dragon, killed me in seconds, obviously, and I'm too scared to try and get past it. Lots of zombies, lots of big demons. Think there might be more narrative coming at what happened to the world so far, but in the very early section I'm in, so far all I've really uncovered about the nature of the world is, it's fucked, isn't it? Really fucked.
Yeah, I think it sort of reminds me of a lot of other fantasy, sort of, I guess, subgenre of fantasy called grimdark, which is usually fantasy set in sort of very violent, dark and sort of dystopian worlds, usually sort of quite violent medieval themed ones.
Yeah, a lot of that, yeah. Just me, a lonely man in armour. I have got some good armour now, at least. Dying a lot. And then there's this gimmick, which I think other games have used. Like, I played that game Hollow Knight about a year or so back, which also used this gimmick, wherein when you die, the points you've collected to level up with, the souls, I think they are left where you died as this sort of blue flame thing. And if you can get back to the same point you were at when you died, without, dying beforehand, you can collect all the stuff you had back again. But if you die before you get back to it, or you just don't try and get back there, you lose it all. On some level, it's nice to have an opportunity, but also it's quite brutal. Because the problem with Dark Souls is it's quite easy to accidentally get over your head and die. If I forget or don't manage to kill someone quickly enough, then another 2 rush in. Going from fighting like 1 or 2 people to fighting 3 or 4 people is normally the difference between I can handle this and, well, goodbye, cool world. And yeah, it's quite easy to accidentally die during bits you've breezed past easily on about 27 previous plays.
It does sound very challenging. Yeah, I don't know if this game was created as a reaction to people thinking games had got too easy. There was definitely a time on Twitter when I saw a lot of people tweeting, they're like, modern games aren't as difficult as, we remember from our childhood. And I do remember, growing up some, madly, infuriatingly difficult games. I know, such as Dark Reign was a video game I played as a teenager that was just almost impossible. I don't think I ever completed it. So I don't know if people thought that games were getting easier, so they decided to create a game that was definitely challenging.
As long as it's still dark, that's the main thing.
Yeah, seems to be a consistent theme amongst video games, dark worlds.
Yeah, I don't know if I'll finish this. It's going to be an interesting, I suspect, test of how much time I'm willing to plunge into it. Because the current problem is, at the moment I need to put about an hour or 2 aside to, really hurl myself at the section I'm playing. And if I really, put aside enough time and dig deep into it, I might eventually get past that room. And there's a lot of rooms. So yeah, I don't know whether I'll ever finish Dark Souls. Maybe I'll come back and tell you if I ever manage it.
Is it sort of, escapist or a way to wind down or relax? Because it seems like it could be quite stressful, and I guess video games are supposed to be sort of entertainment we do to distract us from our stressful lives.
I think the thing with Dark Souls is it's quite playable, it's quite intuitive, the combat is actually quite, fun and easy. It's quite enjoyable to actually play. The part that occasionally gets a bit, oh god, relieve me of this burden, is the part where you spend ages and ages on the same bit, desperately trying to get past it. So yeah, it's sort of, you pick it up and it's fun for about 45 minutes, an hour, and then you get stuck on a bit, and then you get annoyed and put it away and come back later. Well, at least that's what I found. As I say, we'll see if this leads to long-term success. I must admit it's been a few days since I last played it.
I think it's got several sequels, so if you complete this, there's more you can do.
Yeah, I'm aware of the other two Dark Souls games. I'm not sure. I know with games there probably isn't always as much of a strict sense of necessary progression, or you've got to see the last one through to the end to play the next one. So I probably could just jump to Dark Souls 2, but I don't know. Now that I've started Dark Souls 1, I feel like I should finish it, even if I don't 100% it, which I'm probably not going to do. I suspect I'll be happy just to reach the ending if that ever happens. And on that existential note, Alistair, what have you been doing?
Well, I've been watching a show that's on Apple Plus that I can recommend, or Apple TV Plus, as I think it might be officially called, which is Severance. Which I guess, continuing what you were saying, it's another sort of dark in sort of theme, this TV show, but it's a kind of, I don't know, maybe more psychological than violent. It's sort of dark, slightly dystopian mystery about a strange workplace where to work there you have a procedure done on your brain, which meant that when you arrive at the office, you cannot remember anything outside the office, and when you leave the office, you cannot remember anything you did during the day, which thus sort of creates like two different people in the characters who are working in this office. The people inside the office, who are referred to as innies, when they leave the office, it's almost like they blink and they're back and it's the morning. And the outies, the people outside in the world, as soon as they step in the lift, they just sort of blink and it's the evening and they're going home. And the show raises some interesting questions, such as, what sort of person would choose to do this, who would want to forget most of their life. And then there's a mystery of like, why is this necessary? What mysterious things is the company up to? And it's quite a good, interesting sort of mystery, and it's quite dark, and I got to the point where you sort of uncovered several layers of what's going on, and it's a very interesting mystery so far.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of buzz about this. This is definitely one of those, I really should get round to this shows. Once I've finished rewatching The West Wing, I swear I'll yank myself from my comfort zone and watch this. Yeah,
I can definitely recommend it. For start, it's got a really strong cast. Apple have certainly got lots of money to spend on these things. I think it's sort of partly produced, and some episodes are directed by Ben Stiller, which is, I guess, odd because it's not a comedy, but it is well done. But it stars Adam Scott, John Turturro, Christopher Walken, Patricia Arquette, so they've got a pretty impressive cast worth of people.
Yeah, no, I like Adam Scott. I guess I'm interested to see Adam Scott do some dramatic stuff, because obviously I saw him in Parks and Rec, where he was playing, I guess, a kind of a straight man character, but still, a comedy character. So it's interesting that he's, in this new dramatic show, which has massively taken off. I guess comedy actors turning out to also be good at dramatic acting has been, a not uncommon thing in recent years. But it's nice to see Adam Scott joining in.
Yeah. I mean, he's very good in this show. And I don't want to say too much to spoil it, but the question of like, who would do this to yourself? Well, obviously, someone who's had a lot of trauma and wants to forget their life, outside the office. His performance is really quite moving and really conveys the impression of someone who's very sad.
It does sound like something that someone very sad would do, yeah.
Yeah, and the show's also got this slightly bizarre edge to it, in that the things they're doing in the office don't seem to make sense. They spend all day looking at numbers, trying to find groups of numbers that are scary, and then remove them, and not really sure why they're doing this as a mystery. And there's various other departments that seem to do strange things that make no sense. There's a quite dark place called the Break Room, where you're sent if you break the rules, and there's these various sort of cult-like enforcers. So as they sort of dig deep into the mystery, it goes to sort of stranger and stranger places, which is that keeps it interesting, keeps the show intriguing.
Yeah, now I remember it started. I knew it started because I saw adverts on Apple Plus while I was watching Ted Lasso. Yeah, it didn't seem to have that much chat around it when it started, but by the end, my Twitter timeline seemed to be going bananas for it when the finale drops.
Yeah, that's partly because as they reveal more about the world, it becomes more intriguing. It also raises a lot of interesting philosophical questions about, I guess, the nature of the self. Who are we? Are you a different person if you split off your memories and things like that? I've heard this show described as it does for theory of the mind what Good Place did for moral philosophy. So there's definitely interesting stuff going on down here.
Okay, I'll get on this. Fine. This and Yellow Jackets. You've successfully got these on the pile for things I'll actually watch.
Yeah. I'd recommend it. It's strange that right now there's not really that much on like Netflix that I'm excited about, apart from Better Call Saul, which I am enjoying very much. But it does seem that like Disney now, I guess because they've got HBO stuff and Showtime stuff, and Apple Plus have really stolen a march on Netflix that used to be the platform we watched everything on.
Netflix, I mean, it's a combination of everyone pulling their independently produced stuff off Netflix to put on their own platforms. Like, there used to be more like stuff by Disney and Warner Brothers on there, and there isn't really anymore. So it kind of falls back on stuff actually made by Netflix. I mean, even Better Call Saul isn't made by Netflix. They just have the rights to show it. But yeah, the actual shows made by Netflix do seem to have lost a bit of shine. There seems to be a certain generic uninterestingness. I mean, I am going to watch the new season of Russian Doll because I hear it's pretty good, despite my skepticism about whether it's really needed. And I think my partner wants to watch Heartstopper, so we might do that. But yeah, there's not a huge amount.
Yeah, my partner really liked Heartstopper, which I haven't watched. Yeah, there was a new series of Pacific Rim the Black. That was all right. Yeah, maybe they're just, I don't know, a few weeks away from the next interesting new thing that Netflix drops. That's a viral sensation. But right now, it does seem to be that, like, now there's some competition, the momentum's gone out of them a bit.
I mean, there have been news stories going around, I think, about Netflix, losing momentum, losing money, culling a chunk of their animation division or something like that. So there's probably something to it, yeah.
But if you're lucky enough to have an Apple TV subscription, then yeah, watch some Severance.
Okay, first up in today's Marvel Double Bill, it's Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. The sequel, of course, to the original Doctor Strange, starring Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, Benedict Wong as his, former sidekick and now equal/superior Wong, along with guest Avenger Elizabeth Olsen as Wanda from WandaVision, continuing her story arc of sadness over her imaginary children, and introducing Xochitl Gomez as America Chavez, a new character from the comics who has the power to travel between dimensions by punching open star-shaped doorways. And, okay, there's one plot point from the film. I think we can probably review this without spoiling it to death, but there is one plot point from the film we're going to have to spoil, and you're just going to have to eat it. So if you are hell-bent on seeing this film unspoiled, then obviously skip to the Moon Knight section. But yeah, in this film, the role of Wanda, the Scarlet Witch, we really are going to have to at least talk about what that is, and it is actually reasonably successfully obscured in the marketing. So if you want to stay pure and unspoiled on that, then look away in a few seconds when we start reviewing it. So yeah, anyway, the plot of this film is that the America Chavez character appears in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, having been chased through dimensions by some creatures. When Doctor Strange finds her and protects her from the creature trying to kill her, he then decides to go and see the Scarlet Witch to find out what this mysterious, magic, witchcrafty creature is, only to discover that it is in fact the Scarlet Witch herself who is the villain in this film, and who is trying to pursue America Chavez so that Scarlet Witch can steal her powers and use it to go to a universe in the multiverse where her children are still alive. So that is the conflict in this film. That is the spoiler. Alistair, what did you think of it?
Yeah, so I enjoyed this film. It's the 28th film in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which has been going on for a long time and getting close to probably, 20 years, or at least at some point. So yeah, when you get into the 28th installment in your film franchise, you could be at the point of like, this is just another sequel, yet another way of putting these characters together. And the film managed to find a way to be distinctive. I think the original Doctor Strange had a really interesting visual style, a lot of sort of kaleidoscope type effects. And in this one, yeah, there's some of that, but then there's also a kind of dark horror-y edge to it. I know I've seen people claiming like, oh, this is a horror film. I don't know if it's really a superhero film. It's not particularly scary, but it borrows a lot of iconography from horror. And a lot of this is down to the fact that they've got Sam Raimi directing it. And there are some very distinctive Sam Raimi moments, that he's clearly brought in. There's a bit when a large monster gets its massive eye impaled with the big spike, and that's obviously a classic sort of Sam Raimi bit. And there's bits of sort of some reanimated corpses and sort of ghosts. There's little touches that are kind of reminiscent of The Evil Dead and things like that. I mean, it's got a sort of horror mixed with kind of absurd silliness, which is a distinctly sort of Sam Raimi-esque touch, which does make it very entertaining.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed this. I don't know if it's going to be in everyone's top 5 films of the year. We'll see, lads, we'll see. But it's a solid, well-paced adventure. It's, a decent upper-mid Marvel film. I enjoyed it. I don't quite buy into the it's a full-on Sam Raimi horror film narrative I've seen some places, but he does lean into these moments. It's one of those films where, Marvel have hired a director who has a personal style and personal strengths and have allowed him to have several bits throughout the film where he's allowed to go a bit further towards that. And it does lead to some solid jump scares, some quite creepy effects where they lean very hard into the witch part of Scarlet Witch, which are good fun. And plus, the fact that there's a lot of multiverse variants of different characters in this film does mean he's allowed to, kill them. in some fun ways without damaging the important library of Marvel characters. So yeah, it definitely has the feeling of a kind of mid-season episode of the grand Marvel TV show rather than a huge finale epic, but I'm okay with that. I have been heard to moan about every single one of these having to be the end of the world, and yeah, there is the sense that this is just Doctor Strange going on one of his adventures, having a few emotional moments, but it doesn't massively change him, and that's fine. I quite liked it. At the very least, there is still the Wanda stuff, which is a major step for that character and does have a lot of massive important emotional beats for her. So yes, you could argue that it's a flaw that Doctor Strange himself is not the most impacted character by Doctor Strange 2, but I was fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, the Wanda stuff really is quite interesting. I mean, they managed to keep it quite, locked down, and certainly most of the marketing doesn't reveal that she's actually the villain. I mean, if you watch the trailer for this film, it kind of implies that Wanda's going to be Doctor Strange's witchy sidekick as they go on a magical adventure. And obviously they invert that pretty much straight away in the film to reveal that she is the villain. Yeah, and, as someone who, follows film Twitter, reads film articles and stuff, I managed to make it into the cinema unspoiled. I mean, I did want to see this film kind of on the weekend of release to avoid any spoilers, but it was an interesting direction to take the character as a villain. And the fact that you've got someone like Elizabeth Olsen, who's very talented, playing the villain, gives the character some weight. The fact that this is a character we've seen in several films and her own TV show means that we get a feeling of her as a three-dimensional person. When she goes evil because she's traumatized by the loss of her children, you can sort of believe that and to a degree sympathize with her, which makes it much better than a villain who's just evil for evil's sake.
A lot of Marvel films, the hero tends to get a lot of the major beats because they've successfully worked out that they are the people you'll follow from film to film. So, the hero should have the biggest actor and get all the best lines and all the biggest emotional moments. And if anything, that's led to a lot of Marvel films, especially in the early few years, where the villains were kind of forgettable. But yeah, in this one, unusually, the villain is kind of forefronted, and it always makes it feel like an interesting change.
I guess now they're in the 28th film, there's the fact that, Doctor Strange wasn't introduced till, somewhere around the 12th or 14th film. But yeah, he's been in one of his own films. He played a major role in the two most recent Avengers films. He played a major role in Spider-Man film last year. He's been built up as a character. We get a sense of who he is, so they don't need to spend a lot of time pouring characterization into his character. He's got moments with his love interest played by Rachel McAdams, from the previous film, and there's a few bits of character development, but we know him and we know what his deal is, so the film spends time building up against the other characters.
Yeah, and although Cumberbatch doesn't get a heart-wrenching arc here, he's a very strong leading presence. He's a good enough actor to seize the moments he does get. And yes, it would be nice, especially after this, if in the third Doctor Strange film, which you've got to assume they'll probably make, we actually get a major significant Doctor Strange story. But yeah, I think this one does work for what it is.
I guess the other thing about it is that it's expanding the Marvel cinematic universe into multiverses and alternative dimensions, which is something that's been hinted at before. Well, in that show What If, that's literally about alternative dimensions. There's a bit in Loki about multiverses, and there's also a bit in Spider-Man No Way Home, in which other villains from other universes come to fight Spider-Man. But this film is really broadening out the MCU into alternative universes where they can bring in all sorts of different characters and stuff, and really create scope to do new things, because the MCU is feeling a bit crowded, so maybe it needed some space to expand into.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how extensive the Marvel's multiverse plans are. It does already feel like they've been doing this multiverse stuff for an eternity, even though it's only actually been, I guess, about 9 months to a year since they started doing Loki and What If and No Way Home and so on. So I don't know whether it's going to be a case similar to the Thanos stuff in Phase 3, where they build it to a conclusion point, which I guess might be related to the incursion storyline, which is mentioned in this film, and then they slam it shut. But yeah, I have to wait and see. I'm looking forward to some Marvel films that aren't about the multiverse. The next one is what, 4? That doesn't seem very multiversey. That'll be nice.
I mean, I guess the thing with Marvel is that they will do some films to really kind of expand the core storyline and develop the main things, and then they'll have a break and they'll bring in a new character with a new origin story that will feel like very fresh and different, because it's not making reference to about 10 other films when you watch it. I mean, like last year we said, and we weren't the only people who said that, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings felt fresh and original and new because it was a new story and a new character and didn't relate so heavily to all the other films.
Yeah, and coming later we've got Moon Knight, which is also something that's being kept fairly separate from the ongoing mega arc so far. So yeah, they've clearly got that stuff on the boil as well. But this is very much core Marvel business, guest stars, references, a character who, has been in the last 3 major films in the franchise. It doesn't really, I guess, have quite as many dramatic rises and falls as some films. It does just sort of toddle along and then ends, although I do quite like the fact that it's only 2 hours long. That made me extremely happy. I'm very glad that someone at Marvel has finally pulled the not all of these need to be 2.5 hours at least button.
It's nice that it's slightly shorter, though 2 hours is still kind of on the long side for a blockbuster film. But it is nice that, yeah, they were getting quite bloated. Although the film is slightly oddly paced. You know, I did feel at several points I was like, I'm not really getting a sense of where we are in the story. There's some big sort of set pieces that they kind of link together. But I guess it's partly goes back to what you're saying. There isn't much of an overall character arc or journey for Doctor Strange himself. So sometimes hard to tell where you are in the film and kind of what the pacing's doing.
Yeah, I mean, without spoiling it, yeah, I sort of keeping an eye on Wanda is usually a better way to tell where the story is than keeping an eye on what Doctor Strange is doing, because she's the one who's building towards a climax.
Yeah.
Although speaking of the climax, there is an extremely fun, extremely ridiculously audacious kind of horror thing they do towards the end of the film. I don't feel the need to spoil it, but it's very good. It's very entertaining.
I mean, that's a classic Sam Raimi bit. Like, again, it's sort of full of flavour of The Evil Dead and things like that. So they've even, like, some of the ghouls and things that are introduced have a sort of, the way they move kind of feels a bit sort of stop motiony and a bit kind of rickety, which is, you know, again, I don't know if it's deliberate reference to the sort of pre-computer effects, special effects that Sam Raimi did in his, like, sort of 80s and 90s films.
Yeah, and again, I'm not buying into the whole this is actually a horror film idea, but the bits where Sam Raimi does go into that in various stages throughout the film are pretty good. There's a bit where Wanda emerges from a reflection and her body sort of snaps and bends around to reform itself, which is pretty gnarly, as the kids say.
Yeah, that was definitely pushing the boundaries of what you can get away with in a 12A.
Yeah, and as I say, he gets to kill a few characters, because again, they're disposable multiverse variants, and he does do it in impressively icky ways, considering. Again, a lot of use of off-screen impact to stop it being a 15, but still.
Yeah, again, I know, they gave him enough freedom to do something that seemed distinctly Sam Raimi-esque, you know, which I liked a lot. And yeah, it's got all the hallmarks of Sam Raimi, including the obligatory Bruce Campbell cameo.
Yeah, if you were looking for Xochitl Gomez's America Chavez to be like a big scene-stealing character rather than just a sort of endearing but basically MacGuffin-y supporting part, that's not quite here. I have seen a few people express frustration that this isn't really the character from the comics, who is very much a massive, brash, scene-stealing presence, whereas here she's just a nice but slightly confused MacGuffin character who suddenly finds she's the centre of the big chase, and she has a few nice character moments, and she may well grow into something more resembling her comic self, but it's not here yet.
Yeah, I like the fact that she had a LGBT pride pin on her, you know, as part of her costume, and yeah, it's revealed that she has two mums, so yeah, there was a nice bit of representation.
It was there, yeah, I guess, although in the comics, again, that she is one of the most, aggressively out lesbian characters in the books, and it's used quite a lot, and again, the fact that she isn't there yet in these films has, I think, annoyed some people.
Yeah, I guess.
I don't know. Who knows? Maybe they'll get to it. But it is a shame that when some characters like Moon Knight and Ms. Marvel coming up are being basically introduced whole cloth, that they've done this sort of early version of America Chavez and shunted that down the line.
Yeah, I mean, I know some people love to get into the Marvel criminology over decisions and why things were done. I mean, I don't know if it's to do with the fact that, like, you know, they want this to be popular in America, and is there conservative parts of the country that, you know, kind of want this stuff toned down, or also the fact the increasingly popular and probably even more conservative Chinese market, are these scenes sort of strategically positioned so they can be edited out of versions that are shown in China? I mean, this is just speculation, but it's the sort of things that people love to speculate about.
It is. I mean, I don't have a massively up-to-date perspective on that stuff. I think I've read a couple of articles suggesting that the Chinese market has actually dropped off a bit for Western films. Therefore, they're making a bit less effort to massively pander to it, because these films just aren't making as much money as they briefly did for a few years. Like, the gay character in The Eternals was, I think, something they couldn't really have edited out for China. I don't think these films are making enough money in China to worry about it.
Yeah.
Nowadays, as of the last few years. But again, I'm not an expert, and there may well be someone out there shouting, "No, Nick, no. That was last month's article. You haven't read the new article."
Yeah, I believe that Shang-Chi was very successful in China, but that's partly because it draws on Chinese heritage and has actors who are popular in China in it. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, not really an expert in the Marvel criminology, but, you know, this is a big mainstream blockbuster. So yeah, making, I know, LGBTQ plus representation in mainstream blockbusters more common is only a good thing.
Yes, it is better than nothing. I'll give them that. It's interesting, but I have no idea where a lot of this stuff goes next. Like, I don't know when any of these characters next appear. I mean, even Doctor Strange, who has been, as we've said, fairly heavily present in the last few years of Marvel stuff. I don't actually know where he's going next. It feels like there's, space for a sequel here. But yeah, we are actually getting into the last few of the Marvel films that have been announced. So yeah, this feels mid-season, but I've no idea what the rest of the season is, which is interesting for once.
I mean, it depends on how much we want to spoil. There's a bit in the middle of the film in which they introduce some characters and broaden out the MCU. Marvel have got to the point of their corporate machine is so well oiled that now they basically can use their films to focus group future products to see how people react to them dropping in cameos from characters, which I'm dancing around again in case people don't want it spoiled.
Yep, okay, we'll have a spoilable. We'll talk about some of the cameos in the middle. Maybe we'll even talk about the ending, who knows.
Yeah.
Spoilers, massive spoilers.
Yeah. So there's a bit when they introduce a group of characters called the Illuminati. I think it's worth pointing out that most people in the cinema laughed and at the phrase Illuminati.
The Illuminati. Yes.
Yes, which I'm not sure if people are ready to take that seriously. It was definitely a laugh at the film, not laugh with the film. Yeah, and with that, they bring in characters from various other Marvel properties, including, a brief appearance of Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic from the Fantastic Four, who he's not appeared in the MCU before. Also, Patrick Stewart back playing Charles Xavier, again, also for a first appearance in the MCU. Plus also the Peggy Carter version from What If when she gets Captain America's powers, and an alternative version of Captain Marvel, and also a character from the Inhumans, who I don't know because I've not seen that show or film.
Based on my limited knowledge of that film, I think possibly they may have... that show. I think they may have redone his look to make it more comics accurate. I don't think that's the Black Bolt look from the show, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, so again, these are new characters who've introduced. I mean, some of them are just, because it's a multiverse, they're different takes on existing characters. Like, what if things were slightly different? Like, what if Captain Marvel was black? What if Peggy Carter got Captain America's powers, not Captain America or Steve Rogers? So, they're just sort of variants to show, look, things can be different in different universes. But obviously, some of the things are showing, like, look, we can go to a universe where the Fantastic Four is. Do you want that to be a film? If so, tweet a lot of praise at Marvel, and it will happen.
I mean, they've already said they're going to do a Fantastic Four film, although they have not committed to whether it'll feature, as it does here, John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. It was going to be directed by John Watts, who of course directed the 3 Spider-Man Tom Holland films, but he has now dropped out, so now I have no idea what the hell's going on.
Yeah, so I mean, again, that's the possibility of a new things, obviously, that they might be doing in the future. Again, more Marvel criminology, and obviously the X-Men being a huge Fox property in terms of cinema, but now Fox rebranded 20th Century Studio is part of the massive Disney machine, and they could have X-Men in MCU films. Again, are they hinting here that in a future film they could go to an alternative universe? Where there's X-Men.
I don't know. I feel like it would be a shame if they brought Patrick Stewart back for the next X-Men relaunch. I don't know if they'll be able to resist, but part of me feels like they should let him rest.
He's in his 80s.
Yeah, I just feel like there must be a different direction to go with it, surely. It was a nice cameo here. I enjoyed it. It was fun that they, rather than doing him up like in the Fox X-Men films, he was styled to look like the version from the 90s X-Men cartoon, which I did appreciate. That was funny and fun. But yeah, I don't know if I need a whole new Patrick Stewart X-Men film. I think I'm okay.
No, exactly. But again, this is a way that they're sort of expanding it outwards, possibly introducing new things. I also found it quite amusing that the place where they filmed the headquarters of the Illuminati is clearly the British Museum. And I guess if you want a place that's a mix of neoclassical architecture with a lot of neo-futuristic bits added on, it is a building that blends old and new, meaning it's the perfect place for a sort of, the headquarters of an ancient or eternal and a multiverse governing organisation, plus also a high-tech research facility. That was an interesting cameo from a museum I spent a lot of time in.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, they got the sense of them being sort of a powerful group, which I guess the British Museum conveys.
Yeah, that's what they're saying. It's like the royal family. They're as good as the Queen.
Yeah.
Is that treason? Sorry, Your Majesty.
I'm sure she listens to the podcast.
Absolutely. Nothing but time, the Queen. Okay, and last up today, it's Moon Knight. This is, of course, the latest Disney Plus Marvel TV show starring Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight, aka Mark Spector / Stephen Grant / a man with dissociative identity disorder who finds himself pushed into service as the avatar for the Egyptian moon god Khonshu after he dies in a gunfight in Egypt. And in this film, he finds himself at odds with a former avatar of Khonshu, Arthur Harrow, played by Ethan Hawke, and they end up in a battle to stop Harrow from resurrecting the god Ammit and, casting judgment on and killing everybody, as you do. So, we have previously had a quick look at this film, TV show, whatever it is, after the first 2 episodes. We've now seen the whole thing. Alistair, what did you think of it?
We were talking about how Doctor Strange is the 28th MCU film, and this is the sort of 6th or 7th TV show they've done in the MCU on top of the 28 films. And the main thing with all of these seems to be like, how do we make this distinctive? You know, how do we fight against the criticism like, oh, I see they've done another Marvel thing. I guess it's the same as all the others. And in some ways, this is like the least MCU property that they've done. I mean, I don't even remember there being any reference to the broader MCU in it. You know, there's no one mentioning, oh yeah, you know, this is kind of like that guy with the hammer or anything like that. I mean, there might have been stuff in there that I missed, but it's very light on references to other things. I mean, the source of power in this and the kind of supernatural plot is the literal ancient Egyptian gods, you know, are being resurrected. You know, it's not even like in the Thor films when it's like Thor is a alien powerful being who's come to Earth and was perceived as a god by the stupid Earth people who didn't understand what aliens were. But this is like, no, these are literally the ancient Egyptian gods, and their power is the power that they supposedly have. And, you know, it's just left entirely unanswered how that fits into the broader MCU. So in many ways, this is its own kind of thing, which was, I guess, yeah, different and interesting. And Oscar Isaacs was very good playing multiple parts. So yeah, there's stuff to like here. I felt, again, could this have just been a film? Maybe it'd have been better rather than being dragged out into 6 parts. But overall, it was certainly entertaining.
Yeah, I was broadly entertained by this. We talked about this after the first 2 episodes, and I don't know, to be honest, I felt like it was a bit of a mixed bag shortly after that. Like, there was 2 episodes which I thought were quite good and did a good job of setting the scene. And then there was the 3rd and 4th episodes, which felt a bit of a runaround, maybe. A bit like they didn't actually have enough plot for those 2 episodes. Like, characters were just plodding around and talking, and then happily it picked back up again a bit in the final 2. Especially episode 5, actually. I particularly enjoyed episode 5, maybe just because it harkened back a bit to my beloved Legion, with some Asylum stuff, some surreal flashbacks, some walking in and out of mindscapes. It also did a decent job of, you know, giving a bit more depth to the character, who perhaps hadn't quite had it so far. It then picked back up towards the end. The last episode was perhaps a bit of a CGI flail, but did at least have some satisfying resolution moments. So yeah, a mixed bag. I wouldn't quite say interesting failure, but interesting and a bit of a mixed bag. The plot always felt like they were making it up as they went along. This is very much from the hand-wavy, it just does whatever we need it to school of magic, which isn't unusual for this sort of thing, although even by the genre standards it felt like stuff was just happening at random, and you just mostly had to cling to the strong performance of Oscar Isaac in his dual roles as Mark Spector and Stephen Grant to actually get something out of this.
Yeah, I don't know, the pacing was a bit off, and it didn't really seem to settle into a mode. Like, there was the first 2 episodes are in London, and there's sort of the mystery about what's going on with, you know, Mark Spector and, you know, these strange things he's seeing in Stephen Grant and these 2 different personalities, and also, again, appearance of the British Museum. I don't know if they got some kind of package deal with Disney that they got to film both of these things at the same time. Although, again, this is literally about ancient Egypt, so yeah, they're in the actual British Museum, and that makes sort of sense. And then there's the 2 episodes when they go to Egypt, and then there's kind of the last 2 episodes seem to mainly take place inside, you know, the Oscar Isaacs character's mind. So yeah, it kind of felt like it was in search of a focus as soon as it started to like establish, you know, like this is an urban mystery. Oh no, actually no, now it's a sort of archaeological Indiana Jones style adventure. Oh, now it's a Legion-esque surreal delving into the mind sort of thing. And yeah, it was possibly in search of a tone and direction.
Yeah, which is odd because Moon Knight in the comics was a bit more of a straightforward urban vigilante and a bit less of a archaeological Indiana Jones character. But yeah, some strange flipping of tone here, which in some ways made it quite fun, but also did leave it feeling very like things just happened at random. And again, Oscar Isaac did a good job of grounding it. Like, his performance in a sort of a Tatiana Maslany-esque multiple roles type situation. Not that he's quite as good as Tatiana Maslany is in that, but he does do a very strong job of differentiating the 2 main personalities. You can always tell which one he's playing. I mean, it helps that he does a silly accent for one of them, but still, it would still work.
Yeah, and the accent got more tolerable as time goes by. He stopped saying ridiculous things like, "You've come to my ends," or "bruv," and just started to talk like a regular Londoner rather than someone doing that specific multi-ethnic London dialect, which does sound strange coming from Oscar Isaacs.
But yeah, I think the interaction between Mark and Stephen, the 2 personalities in Mark Spector's body, was probably the highlight of this. It was what sort of gave it an underpinning and was the sort of thing you were following, the sort of relationship between them. And the show did successfully hook into that as the main thing it was dealing with. Like, episode 5 is basically a long explanation of that, and that does work quite well.
Yes, and I think that's accurate as far as I can understand to how these sort of disassociated identities emerge, in that it's usually a result of trauma and a coping mechanism to deal with trauma. It's like what we were saying with America Chavez's character and LGBTQ plus representation. I don't think this is like nailing all the details. I mean, it shows that like people with this condition are in a lot of pain and it's results from abuse, but it is a good thing that it's been represented in a mainstream action TV show and is raising awareness about these conditions and the fact that, you know, people with serious mental health problems, they're still people of worth and value. And although I don't know how accurate a representation it is, probably not very, it's still good to have this representation. Although it does fall down on the one thing, which is that, you know, the character Moon Knight is quite violent and fights a lot of people, like the bad guys and stuff, because it's an action show. It does sort of gloss over the fact that people with serious mental health problems are much more likely to hurt themselves than anyone else. But at least we're getting to a place where we can sort of talk about these things in popular culture.
Well, he is, in universe, he is actually, you know, a soldier and a mercenary. He's not just a guy who randomly attacks people.
Yes, no, that's true, yeah. And he's also someone who's experienced a lot of violence in his life, both, you know, abuse and also then becoming a soldier and, you know, going on particularly dodgy or unethical missions. So, yeah, I mean, and they do an interesting thing, you know, of like going into his mind and going through various memories that builds out the character and kind of tells his story. And, you know, I was worried when they were doing that, is this going to be another, they're going to fill in bits that we kind of know and just show us stuff that's been hinted at before, just over-explaining it. But actually, they managed to make it an interesting and mystery with a lot of tension in it. So actually, I thought that worked better than it's been done in other places in the past.
Yeah, as a portrayal of Moon Knight, it's pretty decent. And yeah, I'm not the person either to say this is a good portrayal of dissociative identities, but it didn't feel like they were trivialising it, which is a small win in itself.
Yes, and also considering that, well, what we used to be called dissociative identity disorder was multiple personality disorder, which is a plot twist that has been like utterly abused by film and television for stupid twists for a very, very long time. I think even in adaptation, there's a bit when the Nicolas Cage character's working on his script and his brother's working on his derivative cop thriller script, and at one point he snaps him like, the only thing more overused than serial killers is multiple personality disorders. It has a long history of being treated badly by film, so at least this is doing something to address that.
And yeah, and outside of Oscar Moon Knight Isaac himself, we also had a couple of other characters who got a bit of decent development. To be honest, as Peacemaker showed us, I think you could have probably had more characters and made it feel like a fuller and more populated world. Like, I do increasingly feel one of the problems with these Disney Plus shows is that they incorrectly think they can get away with filling an entire 6-episode TV show with about 3 characters and one quite thin storyline. And I do honestly think they could just use a bit more density.
Yeah. I mean, I guess they think like, economy gives us scope to develop characters and give more background, but it does make it feel like there's only 3 people in this world.
Yeah, no, it just leads to people saying things like, this feels like a stretched out movie again, which it does again.
Yeah.
But, you know, of those other characters, there's of course Ethan Hawke as Harrow, who is okay. I felt like Ethan Hawke brought a lot of presence to it, but the character itself was not that interesting on the page.
And I thought he was much better in the early episodes when he appears as this sort of menacing presence and as a mystery about what he's up to. It's one of those things, once it's revealed, it's a bit flat. That they reveal behind him is that he's just a servant of a bad god and he wants to do bad things, and that's kind of it. But then Ethan Hawke is good. He was a good get for the role. They seem to have cast this amazingly well and got high profile people. I don't know if there's a lot of secret Moon Knight fans out there who really wanted to be in it.
Yeah, Oscar Isaac has, I know Oscar Isaac's somewhat into this stuff. Like, I saw him give an interview the other day where he was asked about X-Men Apocalypse, and he just said ruefully that he really liked the character of Apocalypse when he was reading X-Men comics as a teenager, and it's a shame they couldn't do him more justice. So clearly, yeah, Oscar Isaac, to an extent, does this stuff because he likes it, which I guess is one of the ways you get someone as big in movies as him onto your streaming TV show.
Yeah.
And the other major character, I guess, was Mae Calabawi as Layla, the love interest character, who I thought was sort of contrary to the Ethan Hawke character, was surprisingly good, considering it could have been a bit of a slightly empty bolt-on character. I thought the actress did a lot with it.
Yeah, they could have been the generic sort of love interest. But yeah, again, she sort of contributed to the mystery and expanded the world more. And you got the sense that she was a real person, rather than, again, like, as you say, just an extension of the main character's identity.
Yeah, I mean, there's perhaps the inevitable weird love triangle between her and the 2 Mark Spector personalities, which felt a little bit obvious, but was quite fun in its way, mostly just because of the extra angle it gave on the bickering between the two of them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it kind of showed the different aspects of the personalities more and allowed them to sort of develop their relationships in a more complicated way. So that was good. And yeah, I guess it was a brief appearance, but I did like F. Murray Abraham, the voice of Khonshu. Again, bit of a cinematic legend, probably most famous from Amadeus, which is a very good film, and he's done lots of great films over the years. So yeah, he's a good get.
Yeah, no, I enjoyed the CGI Khonshu character actually. Sometimes the CGI in these Disney Plus shows is a bit weak, but Khonshu was quite fun.
What I did like about this show as well is that it's about, literally the ancient Egyptian gods. And almost every representation of an ancient Egyptian god is usually a person with an animal head. That's how they represented their gods in their art, or at least the art that survives. And I like the fact that they didn't try to change it or make this, they just we're just going to do it full on. There's a god that's a person with the hippo head. There's a god that's a person with like a crocodile head. There's a god that's a person with a sort of bird skull head. There's no, it's like, should we change them to make them like glowing energy balls? Because people might, that's a bit more sci-fi-y. It's like, no, do it straight up as it is. And it could have looked really silly, but somehow they made it work. So I like the fact that they didn't be like, I don't know, let's just change this ancient Egyptian stuff because it could be daft. They actually were like, no, let's just do it straight up.
Yeah, no, I did enjoy the way they just had their own weird pantheon. They could have used the Hall of Gods as an excuse to have a cameo from, I don't know, Odin or something, but no, just stick to your weird Egyptian shit.
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the fact that this does seem very much like its own thing. It's not really part of the MCU, it's sort of separate. I mean, maybe, again, they'll reveal this is another dimension that America Chavez can punch her way into, or...
Yeah, they could do. They could do that. Maybe the Egyptian god stuff is in some weird way just another delusion of Mark Spector's, but that would be hard to explain at this point, I guess.
Yeah, I like the fact they did it straight up. I mean, I guess we're in the age of, like, unironically doing the superhero bits. People were like, they don't feel the need to change characters to make them seem less daft. I think people accept now superheroes after, more than 20 years of this wave of superhero adaptations and 28 MCU films. Now, people are in the place right now when they're ready to just accept superhero characters as they were, and overlook the daftness of it. And I'm glad the fact that extends as far to literal ancient Egyptian deities.
I think there used to be more sort of Egyptian deity media or use of them in sort of fantasy stuff, so it's fun to see them making a comeback.
Now, there was the Mummy.
Yeah, I saw a lot of people talking about the Mummy when episode 4 dropped, because there was so much tomb exploring stuff.
Yeah, I mean, again, there's a bit in the middle of the film when it kind of wanted to be Indiana Jones stroke the Mummy stroke sort of Tomb Raider type thing, which I quite like that stuff. Maybe, again, it was just, I don't know, in search of a direction, and that was a direction it stumbled upon temporarily.
In a way, some of this sometimes reminds me a bit of WandaVision. It tried a lot of interesting things, succeeded at times, and maybe had a bit of a flailing CGI finale. But although WandaVision was better, I still found this to be one of the more interesting of these. Like, I'll take this over Falcon and Winter Soldier any day of the week.
Yeah, Falcon and Winter Soldier was just like a very generic army film, basically, with a side order of sort of authoritarianism thrown in. This was at least trying to be different. And yeah, like I say, it's wholeheartedly doing ancient Egyptian deities and things like that. And it's one of those ones when, like, the pacing was like kind of off a bit, and I wasn't sometimes sure where it was going, and it kind of seemed to move from idea to idea without focus sometimes. They made me feel that, like, is the Disney competence machine faltering a bit?
I think these Disney Plus shows represent a bit of a faulty, yeah. In that there have been very few of them where I've come away and thought that was, solidly, rigidly competent. Probably the closest they got is WandaVision, and even that was not without its major obvious wobbles.
Yeah, WandaVision's the best of the ones they've done so far, and each one of them has kind of had a flaw. The most recent, or the most consistent, I should say, flaw is a lot of people saying, like, this really should have just been a film, and it would have been a bit tighter. But it's still the Disney competence machine in effect. It's not dull, it's not boring. You get your one episode a week and it's an hour of entertainment. The fact that they come out weekly, like every Wednesday, makes it something more of an event than it would be if they just kind of shat the whole thing out as like in one big chunk. I don't know, yeah, although it's flawed, it's definitely got some of that Marvel spark that means they can keep going after 28 films and 7 TV shows and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I mean, like a lot of Marvel stuff, they've got the casting right, and the casts have done what they were hired to do and made the character come to life and be interesting. And that does do a lot to keep you potentially interested, even if the plot meanders and wobbles in places.
That's all we have time for today. If you have enjoyed this episode of Moderate Fantasy Violence, then please subscribe in your podcatcher of choice and leave us a nice review to help other people find out about the show. You can also visit our website, moderatefantasyviolence.com, where you can find back issues of the podcast and bonus content from Nick and myself. Head over there now and you can read an article I have written about Korean sci-fi drama The Silent Sea.
And if you want still more ongoing content from us, you can go to the social media at MFV Podcast on Twitter or Moderate Fantasy Violence on Facebook, where you can find out about our new episodes and amazing pop culture opinions. And if you want even more from me, I am at NickMB on Twitter and nickbryan.com on the broader internet to find out about my current ongoing comic miniseries Death of a Necromancer, the first issue of which is on sale now in PDF. Oh yeah.
I've been Alistair Ball. You can get more from me on Twitter, where I'm at AlistairJRBall, or get more of my writing at redtrainblog.com. Join us next time when we will be discussing Everything Everywhere All at Once and the third season of Derry Girls. Until then, have a good time and goodbye.
Bye.
Brief toilet water break and then back for Moon Knight.
Oh yeah, gonna get me some toilet water.
Wish I hadn't said that.